Are you ready to manage your work and personal world better to live a more fulfilling, productive life? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things productivity. Here are your hosts, Ray Sidney Smith and Augusto Pinaud.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of ProductivityCast. I'm Ray Sidney Smith, and I am joined with Augusto Pinaud. Today, we actually have the pleasure of introducing a new contributor to the podcast. He'll be a regular presence here on the show, and it's Francis Wade, the founder of 2Time Labs and Schedule U. In his work as an author, consultant, and trainer, Francis actively explores the boundaries of time-based productivity. You can find him tweeting at the number 2Time Labs. And so, welcome to the show, Francis, and welcome to our listeners.
Morning, guys. I'm here on a non-holiday. I know you guys are having a great Memorial Day, but I'm in the middle, or just about to start a working day, so I'm not relaxed. You guys are, right?
Relax. It's a good way to call this Monday. Yes.
I am actually going to have a regular full work day. So for those who are listening, this is we're recording on Memorial Day, and so this is Monday of the Memorial Day 2017, and so we are here recording, and I'm going to be working a full day, normal day. It'll be quiet because nobody else will be bothering me. But
is this something you recommend to our listeners?
No, not particularly. Actually, I think I'm really pro people taking time off and enjoying time with their family. So do as I say, not as I do. So
see, Augusto and I were talking about how we productivity advisors give people this advice that we don't follow. We're just talking about that before he came on. So this is a great example.
Absolutely. Oh, geez. So today we are going to be talking about hardware. Because I think a lot of us, in our sort of preparation up to this topic, Augusto had been talking about this idea that people sometimes sort of fall into the hardware that they are using to be productive, and just sort of, and I think it's true, we all kind of come to this place where we have the phone we have the computer we have the tablet maybe that we are using, and we really don't know why or how. It's sort of like, pens of yesteryear. I used to pick up pens at conferences. So whatever pen I picked up at a conference was the pen that I was using until it ran out, and then I would pick up the next pen, and then I fell in love with pens. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go buy, a really nice pen. And so I started looking for the pen that I really wanted. And I think that's sort of the case with regard to productivity enthusiasts. I think over time we start to pay very close attention to the details of all the tools that we use. And so I thought it would be really great for us all to have that discussion.
I had a nice sort of break because when I moved to Jamaica from living in Florida, and I no longer had CompUSA and Best Buy, and I didn't have these electronic stores. I didn't have overnight Amazon or 1 hour Amazon delivery anymore. So I had to be very careful about my technology choices. I also didn't have access to tech support the way I did in the States. So I became a bit of an ascetic, like a monk. I became very, very stingy, because when you don't have immediate access to toys and gadgets and devices, you tend to think about it long and hard before you actually adopt anything new. So today I have what I call a minimalist setup. So I have an Android phone. It's because I work out a lot, I do a lot of exercise, my phones get wet. So, and as a result, they fail. So I've been through maybe about 4 or 5 in the last couple of years. And I decided no more big expenditure. So I have a minimal Android device that's just fast enough, just has enough memory, keeps the number of apps down. It does what it needs to do, but it does it quickly because it happens to have a pretty quick chip built into it, but not a lot of space. And then I have that linked to a Lenovo laptop. I used to use Toshiba, but then I switched over to Lenovo because of the reliability factor. I had a same problem. When my computer dies in Jamaica, it takes a few weeks to replace it if I'm getting it from the States. So I went through Dell, went through Toshiba, and I'm now with Lenovo, and Haven't had one die on me yet. Knock on wood. And I use an Amazon Fire tablet. Again, pure minimalist. What do I when I got it, I really didn't know what I was going to use it for because this was a couple of years ago. I saw everyone using theirs, and I was like, boy, do I really want another gadget? I thought about it long and hard, and I said, well, I at least need to be in the world of tablets. And now that I have a tablet, and I have the 3 devices, the 3 screens that I work with, I see that I use them differently, and I'm trying to sort of segment the way in which I use each device. So I use my tablet for consumption mostly. It's what I call my lazy boy device. I have one of those chairs that sort of leans back, kicks up a footrest, and I can lean back and consume or read or listen or watch so it's where I'm passive. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. I'm not creating anything when I'm using my tablet. I'm just consuming. I only consume on my tablet. My laptop is where my creation takes place. So this is where I need all the power, all the different devices. I need sound. I need good sound. So a microphone is plugged in here. My good headphones are plugged in. This is where I produce content. So it's where I do heavy duty processing of email. And my phone is just sort of a convenience, I guess. It's what I use when I'm away from either from the tablet or the laptop. It's when I'm on the move. I've taken off apps from my phone that don't fit that description. So it has email, for example. I took off the heavy duty Office apps because I don't process or create anything on my phone, not really. So it's just I use it for reminders a lot. It's the one I listen to the most. So of all the notifications that I listen to the ones on my phone. And I try to use that as my mobile notification device, the one that travels with me all the time. So it's my notifier. And while my laptop does give me notifications, it's really my phone that I try to listen to. My tablet, I'm about to turn off notifications from there once I figure out how, but I don't listen to that at all. So I guess I've sort of split my use among the three different types of screens. I'm trying to separate them even further as new software comes out that allows me to do that. I'm trying to do that.
So are you using Windows 10 on the Lenovo laptop?
No, 7.
Windows 7.
I refused to. I tried it for about an hour, I think. Maybe it was a couple hours. And I said, oh, no. I was one of those early adopters. I said, oh, no. It slowed my machine down to a crawl. And it was sort of the first or second week that, when it first sort of came out and started being rolled out. And I said, oh, no. I'm not messing with this thing at all. And unless I can be convinced that it's going to impact my productivity. And so far, I keep reading. I can't see a single feature that I would gain that would make a profound enough difference to run the risk of screwing something up. So,
you get used to the interface.
Yeah, my wife has Windows 8 on her computer, and every time I log in, I'm like, what the heck? Where is everything? I know they fixed that with Windows 10 somewhat, but
they fixed that kind of with 8.1. 8.1, I think, was really necessary. They brought back the start button. Some things that really made it very, very unhelpful, especially people who are more, older, who just really, they had an entire lifetime of computing with a start button, and then all of a sudden it was gone. It was like, how do I compute? How do I get to areas? It was very, very difficult for people. So I'm really glad that they brought back the start button and the desktop, in an easier way to get to, things of that nature. So
I formed a sort of a strong opinion about that after having that experience of not finding the start button and a few other apps that were upgraded in ways that developers like, but users didn't. That developers don't pay sufficient attention to user behavior, and they don't map out the change in practices that users have to engage in order to use your new device or your new app or your new upgrade, they don't think it through in terms of the behaviors. And because of that, there's a lot of the upgrades just simply people hate them. But it's not because the upgrades are bad. If they were the first, that came out as the first release, fine. It's just that once you have habits in place, changing your habits is so hard and it's so unwieldy and it's so difficult that if developers were to think, what habits am I asking my users to change in order to accept this device? That question seems to be one that's missing for the most part. And I think that results in bad software and bad hardware.
Of course, and form factor has so much to do. I think you're talking a little bit about, sort of the operating system there, but I think it makes, on the topic of hardware, it makes such a huge difference that when you have a form factor that you're used to and you're comfortable, when I get to my little segment here, I'll talk about my current form factor problem, but it is something that I think developers need to have more experience with, which is all the various devices that an operating system or a piece of software is going to be on, and how important that affects productivity. How about you, Gusto?
I live these days on a at least 95% iOS. I began that journey around 2011. I was at that time traveling heavily, and I was carrying before that. I had a MacBook, and I have an HP, and I also had another HP that was a tablet PC. So I carry what I literally used to call the dead body. That thing, I had that. I had a scanner that, scanners now are small and nice and beautiful. You can even use the camera of your phone. But at that time, it needed to connect. And then I have a portable printer. I travel over 250,000 miles a year. So I basically had an office that I could use anywhere. When the iPad came out, it was more out of desperation that I tried to reduce the weight and see if I could work with a really minimum set. So the iPad was the first tool I picked for that. Could I have picked a PC and could I have picked a Mac? Probably, but there was something about the iPad that was really cool for me at that time. So I started looking in ways to make it work. It is perfect? No. It is 2017 and it still is not perfect. But I can make around 95% of what I do. And now even those 5% that sometimes require me to log in into the Mac or into a PC, I can even do it from the iPad. I use Google Chrome desktop, remote desktop, and then log in, into the Mac and even do it from the iPad on those few things that I need to do that require me to use a computer. And most of the time has nothing to do with the capabilities of the iPad and has to do with how things are coded into the computer. Something like what Francis had. I have 3 main devices. I have an iPad mini, and my iPad mini is mostly a consumption device. That's where I read, that's where I'm thinking, that's where I do, a lot of high-end work. I'm not typing or writing or anything on that one. I recently changed my 9.7 iPad to a 12.9 iPad, and for the iPad Pro, the big one, and I really been enjoying that. When you make the split screen on that one, you get the equivalent of 2 9.7 iPads side by side. So as much as you need to be really careful on the distraction front, because obviously having the possibility of have 2 screens, it increase productivity, but also increase the amount of distraction. So you need to really keep yourself in check. That said, it is fantastic what you can do with that machine. That machine has 4 GB of RAM. That is more than what most people computers has. I understand most people don't know that, but 4 gigabytes of RAM on an iPad really make it fast, and that make it really fun to work with it. And finally, I have an iPhone that is a phone. I don't use it mostly for anything else. Even a couple of weeks ago, Ray sent me something for me to review, and I was out and about, and I just had my phone, and I said, "Sorry, I cannot read it because I don't have email activated on my iPhone."
I remember that.
And well, I have said a lot about email, and email doesn't matter which device you use and which devices you enjoy, you deal with email. And you need to be paying attention to what you do with those devices and what you do, with that. My focus and my attention is my most precious resource. And if I allow every electronic device I have around me to distract me, then I will never accomplish anything. So it's that the reason why I don't try to do things on the iPad mini that I do on the other iPad. Can I do? Oh yeah, I have wrote 3 or 4 books on the iPad mini. The question is the big iPad better? Yes, I write on a Scrivener. The 4 gigabytes of RAM make a difference when you are working on a Scrivener on the iPad, and that make it way nicer to work in it. So I stopped trying to make the iPad mini work for that and went directly to only write with the big keyboard, the big screen. And anyways, most of the time I carry everything.
Yeah, you brought up a point about distraction, Augusto, and it's funny. I think it was back in 2014. The University of Southern Maine had done this study of students, and it said that actually when a phone is in your presence, like when it's visible, it makes you more distracted and therefore less productive. And so the suggestion that came out of this published study in the journal Social Psychology talks about this idea of putting your cell phone or your smartphone out of view when you're working on a computer or a tablet or something like that, because it actually makes you less productive. I think that's very fascinating. So we all have to be very cautious of what even devices we have in front of us, like our phone, because the phone, maybe not even because the notifications are flashing or buzzing or dinging. It's because, in reality, those things are going to just make us less productive even by their mere visual presence.
I yearn for a powerful notification program that could control my notifications across all my devices. I yearn for it. I'm like, please. And if they could customize notifications per anything, just if I could just customize and control them, I'd be so happy. I'd be over the moon. I think it would impact my productivity.
I don't want to sound like the Apple fan guy, but the Apple people.
There we go.
Apple people can do that pretty much. You bring rings only in the device you tell and whatever you tell. But no, we don't notice how much distraction, a cell phone. The problem is I have said this before, and if you go back to the 80s, okay, the transition between the 80s and the 90s was clear. Okay, when you change from what was, the Cubbies world to the getting things done world, the transition, it came. The United States were changing, and most jobs were changing from a line to a service oriented. The problem is the change that came after that was a technology change, and most people didn't even notice. When you think about FaceTime, and I look this, I see this with my kids, and it is incredible. If I tell right now to the 3 of us we are not going to admit how many hours on the phones and video conference and those kind of things. If I tell you I'm going to call you right now, okay, and we're going to do a FaceTime or a Skype call, okay, or even this, okay, you mentally set yourself to that, okay, because would you leave the before, so where this was impossible, and the earliest stages of this where it was awful to the point where we are right now in 3 different cities, okay, and we can even go and record remotely. When you look at my kids, okay, they get their iPad, okay, to call their grandparents, okay, and they don't understand the technology that is behind that. For them, that is, you could see my 4-year-old getting mad because grandma is not picking the phone and he's calling on FaceTime. How dare she is not picking the call? But for them, that technology is nothing. That's the reality. They don't even consider, for us, we think on, wow, how far quick technology has come. For them, they don't know anything else.
Yeah, so I just want to double back for a moment to Francis's discussion about notifications, and then I'll talk about my setup. But Francis, you might want to check out Pushbullet. So Pushbullet, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But Pushbullet handles notifications. I don't think it handles it in the way in which you're looking for, but it may do some more. I'm not sure. So, but
I'll take any suggestion at this point.
Yeah. I use Pushbullet for management of notifications from my tablet and phone to my desktop when I want them. While the iOS and the way iOS manages notifications is great. There are limitations to that if you're cross-platform, and so it's a nice segue to my own setup, which I am multi-operating system, right? So I use pretty much all the operating systems that are available to me at any given time. So and a lot of this has to do with my work and testing different software. So I'm always on multiple operating systems. So I'm on Mac OS X. I'm on pure Android phone, and then a Samsung flavor of Android on a Samsung tablet. Currently, I got a Samsung Tab, and I'm really loving it. This one has the SIM card in it, so I can have broadband access wherever I might be, and so that's been really great. So having a tablet that can access the internet from anywhere has been really nice, and it creates a hotspot, if I need internet access to my laptop, just like my phone. And so I have a Toshiba laptop, I've got an HP laptop, I've got 2 MacBook Airs sitting in front of me, a 13 and 11 inch, and so and one of those laptops is running Windows 10 and one is running Linux Mint right now. So so I'm running a lot of different operating systems, and I would say that definitely affects other people's productivity in terms of their ability to transition between, and Augusto and I have had this discussion before, Francis, so I'm not going to rehash it, but it affects productivity in the sense that having to switch gears to a different interface is and can be confusing for people. For me, I'm using as many Google products as possible through the Google Chrome interface primarily. So, I didn't even mention the Chromebook Flip that I have over here as well. So Chrome OS as well. Google's represented in the house. So my setup is using the Google Chrome browser really as a vessel to almost everything that I do, which is, connected to the web. I'm using a lot of web technologies. The reason why I have the cross-platform is because, I'm using some bits of native software that I want on the desktop OSs, and I want to be able to use them. And it's also, I do a lot of work with Evernote. I want to be able to test and use Evernote on different platforms to see how they would work for a client, right. And sort of that kind of thing. So I do a lot of testing for those kinds of software. So I think for most people, my setup is not helpful, is not really realistic. But what I really do like is the fact that my processing power is distributed, and I just really need a lot of processing power, and to be able to switch back and forth between, loading something on one page so that I can be doing something on another Like if I'm loading a website or a large database file, I want to be able to continue to keep working while that's happening. And this allows me to be able to do that. That I think, is if you have just one computer with even a very large display, and I'm actually thinking about getting a new display for my primary computer to, be able to do more, because I think the screen is just not big enough. And, I still really need multiple computers so that I'm capable of testing. I still think that I could reduce the number of computers I use on a regular basis so that I'm doing a little bit more focused work on a larger screen. So that's where I'm sort of going with things.
You have multiple keyboards, or do you have one keyboard that allows you to access the different OSs? Can you switch between them?
Yeah, so I came from a world of the KVM switch, where I had actually 4 different computers attached to 2 different laptops, one that sat on my desk and one that sat on the keyboard tray. And so I would use 4 different computers, one which was our main server that was many offices away in our server room, and so I would connect to it that way, and use the KVM switch. Nowadays, I'm on all laptops, so I actually I'm using different keyboards for all of them. And so that's the other thing, they take up a lot of space. So, my desk has to be covered, end to end in computers and the stands that they sort of sit in. And I've got the setup done pretty well so that my tablet sits next to the computer. The phone sits on the computer rest or in its own little stand. I like having all of the screens pretty much at the same height and sort of touching distance, so that I can sort of touch the screens and then type on the laptop and see them, side by side. And I've turned off many of the notifications on my phone and tablet, so I get only the ones that are important, which keeps decision and notification fatigue to a minimum. And so, so it is a bit of switching gears. I feel like it gives me aerobic exercise, it's also good for your vision. For those of you who don't know the 20/20 rule, you're supposed to, every 20 minutes, you're supposed to look away from your screen for about 20 seconds. To something 20 feet away for about 20 seconds, and switching gears between the different, distances for the various screens gives my eyes a little bit of exercise, but also, giving them a little bit of rest from staring at one screen at one distance all the time. And I do have a little notifier that tells me to look away from my screen so that I can do the 20/20/20 rule.
I had a thought, actually. You said my setup may not apply to many people, and probably mine either, and probably Francis either. What I have identified over the years helping people, move into being iPad only, or even recommending, nope, sorry, you cannot be iPad only, is that every setup, it has their own unique, and sometimes geek people tend to add more computers to the setup. Less geek people, wants to do different things, but doesn't matter what you have computer-wise, and if that setup it is. What is important is to come and look what is going to allow you to do the job more effectively. You and I were discussing recently a comment I got from somebody, a friend of mine, who's saying, well, the problem is, I'm stuck with this PC computer. I'm stuck with this computer where I cannot install stuff, where I cannot change stuff, where I cannot do anything of those stuff. And even that I may agree with some of the stuff you said, I'm stuck. This is what it is, and these are the tools that I have. And that reality, limit, in a way, a lot of people. Not everybody can come and do, what the three of us do. That is, let's pick the device, or let's change the device because now it's more convenient, or let's have the 3 devices to work. The reality is there is an incredible large group of people who is stuck on whatever machine is. Are you thinking in that machine? Well, the question is why. If you don't like, I understand you need to do the job in there, but you can go for other tools when you now go to high level thinking, or when you go and do planning, or when you go and do other things. So it's also a matter of understand that a lot of these solutions are coming really out of creativity into trying to solve a one problem. When I used to travel a lot, yeah, I check email on my phone. My phone was my main email machine because that was the thing that was with me 24/7. Since I don't travel that much, well, I don't need it to. Probably if I will start traveling again, hopefully not that much at least, okay, I will need to activate the email on the phone because that's the main computer for me. And that's what you need to understand is what is the main computer and what need to be done in that main computer and what can be done in a different way. Because otherwise you can throw hardware at the problem, but if you don't think what is the problem and what can be the creative solution to the problem, throw hardware at it will not solve it. Francis begins saying he had, the three devices, and this device he used for consumption. And I, guarantee that decide that device was going to be, the consumption device wasn't a decision that was made, in a morning. Oh, well, I'm going to go and buy the device, and now this is going to be just for consumption. It's been a problem. I would love if Francis can spend a couple of minutes into explaining how you reached that conclusion. And I estimate we are going to need an episode 2 on this next week. But I will love Francis to go into, fine, you make that distinction, but why?
Trial and error. That's all I have for you. Absolutely no intelligence whatsoever. Nothing. Zip.
And there's nothing wrong with it being organic, you know what I mean, and being sort of natural. I will say as we close out, for me, I was recently trying to make the decision between the using an Android-based Lenovo Yoga book, which has got this really great handwriting surface and haptic keyboard that sort of flips behind the screen and becomes a tablet, and is sort of this hybrid between a laptop and a tablet device, and almost a writing device as well, because it does all of these great, capable of drawing and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I recognized that, my needs in terms of software were very different. If I were maybe more artistic, I did some kind of visual arts work where I was actually drawing and sketching a lot. Maybe it might have pushed me in that direction. But the kind of work that I do, I recognized that the tablet was really going to serve me better, and limited, and make sure that you understand this, limited my functionality so that I could be more productive. And again, it allowed me to focus what did I need to do on this laptop in order to get things done. And it wasn't, having a Wacom-based, fun little tablet drawing tool built into my Lenovo Yoga book. And I was getting it because I was going to play around with it. And I recognized that doodling during a meeting isn't something that I need or want to do. And I know that's something that people do. And I get that people doodle while they're on conference calls. They doodle while they're in meetings. I don't do that. And I don't want to encourage myself to do that because I take notes in order to focus. And so I actually made the conscious decision to not get something that was going to be more distracting than not in terms of hardware, because I knew that I would want to play with it. It has this really great flipping tool piece that sort of cradles the device back and forth, hinges the device back and forth. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to play with that. I'm going to play with it until it breaks, and so I just chose not to. So as you're going forward with making these decisions, recognize that, make sure that you're buying technology that's going to suit the functionality and what you need to get done, as opposed to what might actually create and cause distractions.
So you're advising us to actually get stuff done?
What a concept.
Yeah, go figure. All right, guys. Well, this has been fantastic, and this has been another episode of ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things personal productivity. We'll be back next week with another episode, and so here's to your productive life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
That's it for this episode of ProductivityCast, the weekly show about all things productivity, with your hosts, Ray Sidney Smith and Augusto Pinaud.